You're watching Experience Comic Culture and Sales. Streaming live daily to Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter.
2, 1.
So I find myself in a strange situation in that I have spent more time on the University of Auburn's law library website in the last 24 hours than anyone who is not currently studying for the bar, an actual lawyer, an Auburn alumna, or anyone who understands what any of this says should. Because I've only understood about 10%. And why am I on the University of Auburn Law Library website? Well, because it's free. And because they have resources there that you otherwise have to pay for. And I am cheap. To quote a song I like, I'm so cheap, I might as well be free. And at the end of the day, I've come back to the same article. It's 3 basic laws that are important. You may not injure another human being or through an action allow another human being to come to harm. You must obey orders given to you by other human beings, except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And you must protect your own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first 2 laws. Now, am I relating myself to a robot? Yes. I am comparing myself to a robot, but more like Bender from Futurama and not the robots from iRobot. So I feel like it's important that Isaac Asimov knows that. And why am I talking about robot laws? Why am I saying it robot? Because Futurama. I blame Matt Groening. But it got me thinking about the laws as it relates to artificial knowledge, which is what I'm going to call it, because we have, as we talk about our topic for this evening, there are going to be certain terminologies that are going to be thrown around that I think it's important to separate. Or in the words of a great band, you got to keep them separated. So artificial knowledge versus artificial intelligence versus machine learning versus learned programming. These are all things that I'm going to say, and I wanted to make sure I had them right. And why am I looking up laws? Well, because they don't exist. So, here's the preposition for all of you watching at home. I am the law, and this is Devil's Advocates.
Judge Kyle, how's it going?
This blade won't cut. That's my Sylvester Stallone impression.
Surprisingly accurate. Was that your impression or was that AI's impression?
That was my impression of Sylvester Stallone. My current impression of Sylvester Stallone is, I am a Tulsa. Okay. Because my Zoidberg impression is not nearly as good.
But oddly similar. That's the funny part.
Right. Dr. Zoidberg. Yeah. No, really the only Matt Groening impression that I do, like Matt Groening universe impression I do well is worst comic show ever.
Nice.
And I practiced that by being a comic book retailer for 15 years.
Yeah. I mean, some of that DNA just kind of seeps in after a while, right?
Yep. I used to do the doctor.
Oh, the doctor's good.
I can't do it anymore.
Sorry, which doctor?
From The Simpsons.
Well, there's 2 doctors, right? There's the doctor that's like the hack, and there's like their family doctor, right?
Oh, I can't think of his name. I'll figure it out. Hold on.
Yeah, Dr. Nick.
Hold on.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I'm okay. Jay's got my back on that one. Oh,
Dr. Hibbert.
Gotcha.
I used to do Dr. Hibbert.
Yeah.
I can't do it anymore.
That makes sense. So hopefully you're doing well. I will just warn you in the chat by saying that I'm so far living up to my 2024 New Year's resolution of spending the entire year sick. Going great. I am sick again here in 2024, so I apologize for any sneezing, coughing, nasalness. I'll try to mute my mic whenever that happens, but just warning you guys, I'm not 100%. In fact, I am sick again and sicker than last time, so it's fun.
Sickatron, are you able to measure how sick Bronze is?
Yeah, give me a rating of 0 to 100%. 100% being dead. Where am I?
Right.
Or not alive or whatever.
Right. I got to send you a meme later. But we'll deal with that. 97.
Ooh, man,
right, so,
I'm one off from a boy band. If I was still just 98 degrees, I would be doing much better. So yeah, we're talking about, if you haven't kind of caught into the idea of what we have going on here yet, we were talking about AI art, a topic that we haven't really dived into.
I did a whole show on it prior to this iteration of this show where I talked about it. And I don't think it's going to surprise anyone that I am vehemently against AI art.
What?
Shocking. In fact, Sean has said some things that I disagree with, even though I didn't used to, but I've learned some things. So we'll get into it. But I think the question we're really asking, because the thumbnail is AI art, straight to jail, in a reference to Fred Armisen's character on Parks and Recreation, where he talks about, you undercook fish, you overcook chicken, straight to jail. So are we too hard on AI art?
Yeah.
And there was a creator friend of mine, acquaintance, and Facebook work proximity associate, who made a post last week that, I'll be honest, I unfriended the guy over.
Mm-hmm.
Where basically his premise was AI art is here to say, sit back and take it. And he got really, really dragged over this, as well as I think he should have. But I guess my question is should he have? Are we being too hard on AI art, or are we being too callous with AI art? And that's the question I think I would like to try and answer tonight.
Yeah, and I think this is a really, it's a nuance to the question that I wanted to see discussed. And the reason why is because when it comes to AI art, there is this sudden knee-jerk reaction, and it's kind of speaking to the thumbnail, right? AI bad, straight to jail, don't pass go, don't collect $200, you should never be in comic books again. And I understand that. I do understand the importance of saying, putting your foot down, we don't want AI art in comic books. I get it. I do wonder, though, that there's some nuance to how art can be created, especially when you're talking about digital art and you're talking about the process and processes that are involved in the creation of digital art. And I had to admit to myself a while back that there are places along that line where I could see AI tools being used that could be potentially okay. I don't know that I'm okay with that. I'm not saying that like I'm signing off on AI art. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I just started to realize that there's things that are involved in the art creation process, especially on the digital side, as it is right now, that I realized I didn't understand. That there are potentially some brushes that digital artists use right now that incorporate some AI algorithms in how the texturizing of the brush is.
Ironically, that's not AI. That's machine learning which is
yes, but
different.
but it splits hairs to a certain degree.
But it's all the difference in the world.
Well, but my point is not that that is AI. My point is that there's elements along the pathway of digital art creation that can be different than what we expect as casual consumers. And so it makes me wonder if there's a gray area to be explored to where AI potential might be accepted. My point being that, as a novice, as somebody who's not an expert in digital art creation, and I keep going back to digital because I think we all, looking at pencils on paper, with ink applied afterwards, the old fashioned way. I think there's a lot of people that want art to be created that way exclusively, but that's not for everybody. There's people that really enjoy digital art. And I think that's another one of those knee-jerk reactions that people had. And I think it's very important to put that into perspective is 15 years ago, people were lambasting digital art. And now you have people that still are. But you have a whole kind of culture that's grown up around almost a generation of readers that's accepted digital art or prefers certain things about digital art. So to knock digital art is a problem. And it makes me wonder, are we doing the same thing with AI? And I'm not saying I necessarily want to read a comic book that's completely created with AI imagery. But I might be willing to allow for certain uses of AI in that process, depending on, think about this, like what is the overall percentage of the work that is being completed by AI? And at what level is that acceptable or unacceptable? If 0.1% of it is using AI, like maybe there's some lighting that's used or some background characters that are generated with AI so the artist can actually get the work done instead of having to pass it off to a fill-in artist to fill in the background. Is that unacceptable? At what point do we draw the line? Because there needs to be a point. And I don't think in 20 years, we're going to look back on it and say the line is zero. There can be zero AI elements used anywhere in comic book creation. I bet you at some point we will accept certain aspects of AI creation. And where is that line is the question for me.
Here is the problem. And I love your question on its premise, but here's the problem with your question. Is it's missing a word.
Okay.
That word is generative.
Right.
AI art. So here's why I've been reading law websites. This is it. The word generative is the key term here. So AI, artificial intelligence, is this big, broad umbrella,
right,
of things. That includes machine learning. That includes the algorithm on YouTube that may or may not have led you to us. That includes what you see on TikTok and Facebook feeds, what you see on other social media, right? Those are all algorithms. Those are all machine learned, AI-based things. But they're not generative. Generative AI art is what's really in question here, which is to say art that is created from other art.
Right.
So, and Sicko, I'm glad you're here. And just real quick, shout out Mad Spidey, Sickatron, Sean, Kenneth Bird is here. Over on, we got Skunk Snot, who's still my favorite name. Twin Comics 616 and Shore Bet Comics over on Instagram. Say hi when you get here, everybody.
And Anthony over on YouTube as well.
Yes, Anthony. Sorry, Anthony. And Jay is watching us here because he has to, and there because he's a sadist. He wants to watch us 2.5 seconds later or whatever. Anyway, so generative AI is really what we're calling into question here, because the brushes and the lighting effects and the things that you can do in Photoshop, in Illustrator, in Procreate, in Clip Studio, and all of these things are algorithm based, not and therefore not generative, right? It's this idea of, hey, Skunk Snot's more than one place.
Whoa.
I love it. Anyway, so if you are using machine learning, which is a lot of what we're talking about when we're talking about lighting and brush strokes and things like that, That is taking inputs that you put into your machine, running them through an algorithm in a piece of software, and outputting something based on your input. Not taking into account any input other than your own.
Right.
Okay. So that's the same as, in a big way, what creators, and I'm not going to name names, but big name creators who have always been on the cutting edge of new art technology, including one who is literally the godfather of augmented reality comics, are doing. They're building their own AI systems where they only input their own art. They let the algorithm learn from their own art and let the algorithm assist them in creating their own art based on their own art. That's machine learning.
And it's a great distinction. I'm really glad you made that distinction. And I think that part of this conversation has to include, though, that there are people that are not okay even with that. And it's not just an edge case. You go to,
but we can't determine where the line is if we don't know what is on either side of the line.
But I'm just pointing out that there are people out there who say no AI in comics, hard stop, and they include things like the procedurally generated type stuff, the stuff that is being used only from the artist that is inputting their input. But it is, you get to the stickier conversation is definitely the more focused conversation, which was primarily what we should have. I agree.
I guess my question is, are those people against augmented reality comics? Are they against 3D rendered hand-drawn comics? Are they against the use of anything other than a photostat to put trade dress on a comic? I mean, because that's really what we're getting at here, right?
Yeah.
The differences are these minuscule things. You do know that on every Superman cover, they don't hand draw the Superman logo, right? They just slap that sucker on. And in the old days, they would make photocopy. They'd use a photostat, which they would take off every time and put on again and again and again. Like, they've always been trying to find ways to make the work easier.
Yeah.
Right. So the question becomes, when does it stop making the work easier and start doing the work? And again, that's where that generative AI comes in, right? If you tell a computer algorithm to create Kirby Crackle based on your own inputs, it's not going to be pure Kirby Crackle. It's going to be your version of Kirby Crackle. And it may mean you only have to draw one line and you get a bunch of crackle, but it's still not going to be the same as if Jack Kirby had drawn it himself. Like,
or the same as if you drew it yourself based on what you interpret Jack Kirby's designs to look like.
Right. It's going to be based on the inputs that you have created in your software that has learned how you draw that thing.
Yeah.
Right. So when we talk about drawing a line, if we don't know what's on either side of the line, we can't draw a line. So it's important to know the difference. So generative AI does what currently OpenAI and Microsoft are being sued by the New York Times for, and what, I can't remember the name of the company. I'm not going to give them credit. What you're seeing on this big list that came out. What the software does is it scrapes the internet. So rather than going out and reading individual articles or looking at individual articles, it scrapes the internet and looks at everything very quickly and then uses that to generate or create new content based off of what it learns from the stuff it's scraped. That doesn't require consent, it doesn't require buy-in, and it doesn't require payment at the moment. It is also being currently, the lawsuit is that copyright infringement.
Yeah.
So generative AI, and Sean says, I guess it would help if you gave a solid example of generative AI. Generative AI is when you type into a piece of software, I need a picture of Elvis Presley talking to aliens on top of the Eiffel Tower.
And to take it one step further, what a lot of people out there in the comic book space might do, and then say in the style of Art Germ,
Right.
which is even where you get even more focused. Whereas the first example, it's going to pull artwork from a lot of sources available online, to where the second example, it's going to primarily pull sources from a specific artist, or you could list a couple different artists there. And boy, they tend to pick on the same few artists over and over because they are famous, popular artists right now that sell comic books. So that's where you're kind of getting into that territory where you're just kind of creepily saying, you know, not just the entirety of the internet, give me this image that pulls from everything. Give me this image that pulls from these specific artists that are popular and in vogue, and let me encroach on their style with this type of AI artwork.
Right. So that's exactly it. Is you could say, I need a picture of this, do it with this in this place in the style of so-and-so, and it spits out a piece of art. That's generative. You know, there's no photo on Google image search or anywhere of Elvis meeting aliens on top of the Empire or Eiffel Tower. Because if there was, it'd be hanging in my office right now.
Even that's a poster. What they want you to believe.
Huh?
That's what they want you to believe anyway.
Well, no, they're in Vegas. They're not at the Eiffel Tower. Like, it's a different thing.
Yeah, they're at the Paris.
Oh, okay, fine. But you know what I'm getting? Like, that is generative AI. Whereas other forms of AI, when you talk about when you go to the doctor and they put in all of they ask you 1.5 million questions, which, Bronze, I'm going to encourage you, go to the doctor, get checked for RSV, get checked for anything else that ends in V. Also, anything else that starts with R.
Anything has a V in it.
Right. They put in all your symptoms, they put in all your information, and then an algorithm that is AI driven helps spit out a differential diagnosis. There's no one in the world who's saying that is a bad use of AI, because it's helping doctors based off of training that has been given to this AI for medical purposes.
Yeah.
When they start saying the doctors can't diagnose people, the AI has to diagnose them, then we have a problem. So
can I offer another example that I think is more related in a lot of ways, and where I also think it's okay? Here's the example I love to give, and it's important. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, AI doesn't belong in art," and you can say generative, you can say it however you like. Here's the example I love to give. A lot of people love the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings movies. Very famously, in the Two Towers, they have a shot that has more bodies, more humans, supposedly, in it than any other shot that existed up to that point. And there's a giant battle scene with orcs and riders from the Rohirrim and all that stuff. Well, 99% of the characters in the background in that battle scene are created using AI. So you're taking an art form, which is movie making, and you're including in the special effects technology AI being used to create the characters in the background. Now, the difference being, and the reason why I think most people are going to be okay with that, is because Weta, the digital effects people behind the effects in that movie, use their own in-house technology that they created using character models that they created to populate that background. So next time you think that AI doesn't have any place in artwork whatsoever, think about that example. And there are ways that example could go wrong, but there are also ways that example could be used perfectly in a way that I think 99% of people are going to feel is ethical and okay in the art form.
Well, so this is a good question.
It does raise another question.
CGI, which is what that is.
Yeah.
Computer generated imaging are technically not considered part of the AI umbrella until recently. It was considered its own art because it had to be created in this sort of bubble, right? It's why the first Avatar movie cost enough money to cure cancer, because James Cameron had to build the CGI interface and build the program and build the database that this program could draw from to create the art needed for the movie. Right? So up until recently, that was not considered AI. It was just its own thing, CGI. And up until recently, AI in the art or in the computing world was basically used to try to beat Ken Jennings at Jeopardy and win chess games and help doctors and some of that kind of stuff, right? It was used in some sort of very specific instances. But in recent years, that has expanded to start doing this internet scraping and doing this kind of training that has created this generative style where you're giving AI enough information that it can create new information based off of it.
Yeah, I mean, in this specific example, the reason that one creeps into my mind is, and again, it's very different from generative in the sense that we are using it now, but at the time, they were calling it generative AI because they are generating the models in the background based on pre-existing models that they've incorporated into their system. And that was the first time that it hit my radar, not just talking about CGI and the way that we normally think of it, because the movements of the characters were all being done by the computers
Right.
in an AI fashion, learning from itself and the models that they've input into it. And that's why the definitions for some of this stuff is going to continue to be defined and redefined as we go on. And that's why I say I wonder in 20 years if we're not going to look back and find that we are in a different place than we are now as far as our understanding and our moral acceptance, ethical acceptance of use of AI, generative AI can be morphed, can be changed, because we are going to continue to push those goalposts and try to use new technologies and try to further things along. So that's where I think the meat of the conversation kind of comes in, is you really have to kind of get lost in the details there and see what's acceptable to you and what's not.
Well, and I'll give you an example of acceptable and not for me.
Sure.
I no longer go through the McDonald's drive-thru because where I live, they have started using AI to take your order at the McDonald's drive-thru. Now, not only does the AI not know how many packets of tangy barbecue sauce you want with your chicken nuggets, but it doesn't understand when you ask for extra. Like, bro, do you not understand I want to dip my fries in this stuff too? Like, it doesn't. So that is where I draw the line. I won't go through the drive-thru. I now will not eat McDonald's if I can't go in, because I'm not going to go through the drive-thru. I'm not going to feed the AI my chicken nugget order. So you determine, and the reason for that, it has nothing to do with AI. It has everything to do with, I don't want employees to be replaced by this thing. Right? You mean to tell me that you're going to replace a minimum wage earning 16-year-old who needs work experience with a computer? Well, sure, it costs less, but at the same time, what happens when you need somebody to run the fry machine and you don't have a 16-year-old to do it? Like, somebody calls off, you can't just bump that 16-year-old from drive-through worker to fry cook. Not with AI, you can't. So that's why I drew that line, right? They're always going to use the app, and I'm like, no, exactly. I'm not going to use the app. I don't want McDonald's to have my credit card number. That's just dangerous. I mean, God, I'd be broke. But this is the point, right?
Big Mac.
We're not going to get into that. Anyway, this is my point, though. When AI art starts taking the jobs of human artists, that's where we have to draw the line. So Sean, earlier on, and Sean, you're going to be great. You're going to help me out here a lot. Sean said, quote, so I can understand that there's a use for AI, for instance, for someone like me who can't draw worth a darn. And then he says, I can put some parameters and create a base image create a base image of a character in my head, which I've done for a comic series I'm trying to flesh out, so I can show an artist. What you used to would do, Sean, is you would work with an artist and you would talk to the artist and they would draw and you would talk and they would draw and you would talk and you would come up together with what that looks like. You have replaced an artist's job by using AI art. Even if you think you're going to hand that to an artist later, instead of paying that artist for their time and having them have some level of creation in your book with you by creating these character designs, you're not working with a character design artist. You're working with AI. And now you're not working with a character design artist. So that's a human job that is not being done.
So this is the one that gets to be, I like you, I am very much on the side of, I don't want inkers to go away because we develop an AI that can ink over pencils or something like that. You know, I'm very much of that mindset. Talking to some people in Hollywood that were talking about using, they have a pitch for an idea. And instead of trying to work through an artist, trying to have an artist, you know, flesh out the final storyboards, having a rough cut storyboard created with AI, and then having the final version of the storyboards that are going to be used for filming created by an artist who is then going to flesh that out. They're talking about those kinds of nuances. So you're not actually replacing the final artist in that equation because you're still going to use one anyway, but this is more for the pitch meeting as opposed to the greenlit product that's going to be used for filming. It's kind of a similar idea. Like if I'm a independent creator and I am out there trying to think about how I'm going to make this work, and if I use AI tools to create storyboards of what I want my flow to look like, and then I hand it over to the artist or a series of artists and I say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. This is just obviously the rough sketch. What can you guys deliver based on this? If I still hire the artist in the end, I understand your point. Your nuance there is that you could have hired an artist to get that storyboard initially placed there. But if it's the difference between getting your project off the ground to where you can hire the final art team in the end anyway, I mean, like that's where you
have
have
to tell you what that does?
Sure, go ahead.
You don't get Neil Adams. Because you know Neil Adams was a pitch storyboard artist before he was a comic artist.
Yeah.
He did pitches, roughs for advertising companies before they did the final storyboards of the final product. And he did the finals too. But that was where he got his start. You don't get Neil Adams.
But I'm saying if you can't afford Neil Adams anyway, and it's your
but at the time Neil Adams was a nobody.
I'm saying like even when Neil Adams was a nobody, if you can't afford him in the first place, and this is how you get your project off the ground versus how you don't get your project off the ground. See, this is the area where I feel like there's a conversation to be had, because it's not all or nothing if you don't ever get it started anyway.
So let's talk about Sean, because Sean is here and he's easy to talk about.
Sure. Sean, you're our example.
Sean has a comic he wants to make. So he goes to someone who does character design on Fiverr and pays them $25 to help him with a character design. He then decides, okay, this is the comic I want to make. He still has to pay an artist to draw his book before it gets published. And in today's world, most publishers aren't going to pay for an artist up front. They want you to come with a final product.
Right.
And then they'll decide if they're going to publish it. So you're still going to have to pay an artist. So you got to do the work of finding an artist who's going to look at your AI generated concept of a thing and then redraw it themselves. That's what you're advocating here. Which is okay, that's one way. Or you find a character design artist who is just starting out. Somebody, you just throw it up in a message board on the internet. You just throw it out there. Hey, I'm looking for somebody to help me with character design. I can't pay you, but I will give you a creator credit on this book. And there are enough artists out there who are looking to do stuff that you'll probably get a nibble. Or you'll have a friend who's way overqualified reach out and say, hey man, I'm not doing anything right now. I would love to help you. And now you have an actual artist who you can actually help, and you can pay an Applebee's gift certificates and beer, right? To help you create your character. Now you go pitch your story. And if a publisher says, I need a final product, you already have a relationship with an artist now who you can say, hey, look, they want to see it done. So what's it going to cost me per page to get it done? And if it takes you a year to save up and make that book, then it takes you a year to save up and make that book. That's the way this has been done for years, right? So my problem is there's a way you can do it for no money where you're using people and you're having people and you're having a creative team. And then there are ways you can do it for no money where you use a computer. Which one is the better choice? And
Yeah.
that answer is going to be different person to person. I understand that. But I guarantee you that if I ask 100 artists, would you be willing to work with a writer who came to you with an AI generated character design? 85% of them are going to say no. They don't even want to work with you.
Right. And that's 100% true now. Again, I wonder what the future will hold when it comes to what the world looks like, because there is this you come back to the idea of there's a hardline stance on AI bad. It's this knee-jerk reaction. And I'm not even necessarily saying that's wrong or that it shouldn't be that way. But I do wonder, to me, you could take Sean's example, and maybe Sean can't afford that artist on Fiverr. Talking about people who really have an imagination, they have an idea that they want to see brought into reality. Maybe they don't have a network of friends to where they can find somebody who's willing to do it for free. Maybe they can't afford that Applebee's gift card and a 6-pack of beer down the road. And they really do want to have something that is solid to show other people that may be willing to get their foot in the door. I'm not hardlining this has to be the way it's done. I'm just saying that it's an option I can understand. And I think that you're talking, if you try to say that this is as bad as creating an AI comic book that's published and never disclosing that it was created with AI artwork, I think we're talking about a much different scenario.
We definitely are.
And I think this is kind of where you're starting to make the case for, I can see the logic. I can understand why somebody might do this. There are people that are out there who do not have the social skills to work with other people, and yet they still want to create something. And so this to me, actually, there's a couple comments I want to get to, but this to me actually gets to an interesting question.
Mm-hmm.
If you are one of those people who wants to create an AI artwork, and you fully disclose that your artwork is created with AI, and there ends up being an audience out there, is it wrong to make it in the first place? Because you didn't set out wanting to do a traditional comic book and settled for the AI version. You actually wanted to do the AI version.
Here's my question.
That's interesting to me.
Are you doing it to say you did it? Or are you doing it to publish it and sell it and make money?
It's a good distinction.
Right. And that is, that's everything, right? Motive matters.
Yeah.
So if you're making your comic book because, God, I've got this idea for a comic book, and if I don't get it out of my head, I'm going to go nuts. Have fun. I don't care how you make it, because that's for you. But the second you make a product that is for me, and you want me to give you money for it, now you have to operate under the social norms and under the world we all live in, right? So the answer to that question really does matter in terms of why are you doing it?
Yeah.
Like I wrote a movie pilot 2.5 years ago. For me, it is shelved. It's never going anywhere. I'm not going to pitch it. You know why? Because it sucks. If I wanted to throw some images on that, I absolutely could go to an a generative AI source and throw some images together and throw it with it and be like, yay, I made some pretty pictures to go with my stupid little script. And it's for me, and I'm not hurting anybody, except that I am participating in the theft of, anyway.
Right.
We'll get into that later.
100%.
But if I then turn around and try and sell that to somebody, I'm perpetuating essentially this idea that we don't need humans to do this.
Yeah.
And that is where I draw the line.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, by the way.
We're talking about
I'm
where
on
do we
the same
draw
page.
lines. It's not one line, right? It's
Yeah.
multiple lines that we have to draw on this thing. So I have problems speaking or making sense is a challenge. Since grade school, I've always had to use a TTS program to do notes. Am I less creative as a writer using technology that assists me in that? No. And I'm not saying that anyone who uses AI is less creative. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there is a way to go about it, right? You use TTS to do notes. I love TTS. I use it my own self for the experience all the time, right? I've used several different pieces of software to help myself because of my ADHD. That doesn't make me any less creative. It just helps me to formulate those things. But those things are not then having a price slapped across the front and going out to the public. Those things, I'm not passing off what TTS does for me as work that people should be compensating me for. Those
Point
are
of
for
order.
me.
Point of order, though. By your logic,
Mhm.
shouldn't you be hiring a secretary to do that work?
Jay, that's Jay's job. Jay,
Yes.
I need the notes from my brain typed up. Thanks.
Okay.
But I mean, like, isn't that really pretty similar to what you're saying, though? Is that a real human can do that job?
Sure,
Why are you
absolutely.
replacing it with software?
Sure, absolutely. But at the same time, a real human being could do that job, but would a real human being want to, like, you can't hire a real human being to be like, I changed the dressing on my foot at 11:30.
I mean, you can.
Believe me, no one wants that job.
Oh, believe me, there's people out there that would love to be paid to do stuff like that.
I'm sure. But once
Especially
you've
if it
seen
deals with feet. The internet's weird.
once you've seen the wound on my feet, don't nobody want to do that. But here's what I'm getting at. There are tools that help you be creative. And then there are tools that are creative on their own.
Yeah.
A thing that helps me be creative does not generate anything. All it does is take what I give it and turn it into something usable. Right? It's not creating new ideas. It's taking my ideas and putting them in order. Right? Helping them to make sense. It's when that then turns around and spits out something of its own creation that it becomes a problem. And that's why that word generative is so important in this argument. Because there's perfectly good AI that is non-generative.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's why in fact, actually, this kind of speaks to Rob's comment here. In order for AI to work, it needs input. For instance, in this instance, input data is other people's artwork from artists who worked hard to hone their craft and whose work has value. The can't network argument is dangerously exploitative at best. Rob, you're missing some of the context of our conversation, which is we are talking about the difference between generative and non-generative AI, which is based on others' artwork. It's something we mentioned near the top of the show because it does affect a huge part of this conversation. Without that context, I agree with your comment completely. But that's why we were talking about the differences throughout the show, because it does change each element of this quite a bit. If you're saying AI is a tool and then you're saying AI is a tool only because it's taking the artwork from others, those are much different conversations.
Right. So again, we mentioned it earlier, and this is where I really think we can start to kind of draw some definitive answers. Is that a very well-known founder of a very well-known publisher that started in the early 90s that maybe just had their 30th anniversary?
I'm having a hard time imagining this.
Yeah.
I can only pull up an image in my mind.
Right. Has built an AI system that literally can only look at, it's confined to his own art. The millions and millions and millions of images this artist has created over their 50-year comic career. And what they've done with it is they've trained it in such a way that it looks at their art. They can put in and say, I need a 3D model for my 3D modeling software of this character that I've drawn 800 times. I need this character 3D modeled for this software. And it can spit it out. Right? That is not, in my opinion, the same as generative AI. That is machine learned AI.
Yeah, it's the context of it's almost like the way I think of that is like a closed ecosystem.
Right.
You're only feeding it your own artwork.
Right. So I have no problem with that. Because again, you're only what's the word for? Cannibalizing yourself. It's a different thing entirely to look at the thousands and thousands and thousands of artists named in this lawsuit as people for whom generative AI has scraped their work. And then say, okay, spit me out some art and think about all of those people too. So I think it's a big difference, right? I think that's the whole difference. You know, it's this idea of when you talk about how you're teaching the software, it becomes a very different demon.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, speaking to the point here where I think that I have to kind of very clearly state my opinion on this. The use of generative AI in comic books to make and sell artwork is something that I'm not okay with. It's a pretty hard line for me. My point on this whole topic is that you get to certain gray areas where I think AI may have some uses, it may have some benefits for artwork, and it's not necessarily generative AI, although there are some examples like the example Kyle just gave. If some artist who has drawn thousands of images wants to use their own artwork only to create poses and essentially wireframes or whatever to block out their art, do I really have an issue with that? Because we all know that, you know, especially as artists get older, it's harder for them to pump out as much artwork. It's harder for them to put as much time into it that like they used to. Their hands start to cramp easier, arthritis, all these things start to happen. If it means we still get artwork from that person and they're upfront about how they're doing it, am I okay with that? And that's a much different conversation than, hey, guess what? We all found out that this comic book cover that was pre-ordered and sold in droves and people were flocking to it was actually created using generative AI from people that are trying to steal, you know, Artgerm and Willjack and all these popular cover artists right now's work and the style of their work and create derivative works based on it. Those are much different conversations. And I think that they need to be had in the context that each one deserves. And I think that we need to, as much as we're willing to raise the pitchforks and vilify the example of generative AI artworks on comic covers and in comic art, which I think should happen, I think we need to start having these conversations about what is acceptable uses for AI going forward. Because, I mean, just think about how much the conversation about AI usage has changed in the last 2 years. Things like the beginnings of when you started hearing about Chat GPT. And I know AI has been around a lot longer than that. I understand that. But it has become on the forefront of the public consciousness, especially over the last 2 years. And in that time, I mean, think about the quality of AI art. You know, think about how there used to be easy, super telltale signs of AI art. Things like hands would look completely wrong. They'd have too many fingers. Well, those things, they're focusing on getting better. And they've gotten better. And, you know, for example, here's the one example I want to throw out there. I recently saw an image that I did not think looked original. It didn't look to be human created to me. And I made a post about it on Instagram. And this happened to be about the comeback of Penthouse Comics. And they had a 150 cover that I said, I ran this through an AI image detection, and it came back positive, and this appears to be AI artwork. Penthouse Comics themselves, their social media presence came into my post right away, to their credit, and said, at the time that we purchased this artwork for use on our cover, we did not know that it was AI. And the interesting story behind that, the interesting layer of detail, is one of the articles in their magazine, their first issue that's going to be coming out, is about AI art and its effect on comic books and where it belongs in comic books. And so in that context, they apparently decided to leave it because they thought it had a connection to story. Now, I question all of that, but that's the story that they spin. But it is interesting. So we're talking about ostensibly a real comic industry publisher out there that greenlit a cover going on their comic book that apparently they didn't understand was AI artwork. And I guarantee you they aren't the first people to do that.
Well, and I shared a story with you earlier from Hasbro that they had released a promo image for a set of Magic the Gathering cards. And they have a company policy that they will never use AI art on Magic the Gathering cards because the original pieces of art are such an integral part of that game.
Right.
Right? Like, it is an important part of that game. But they subcontracted out the image for the background image of the marketing. And that company that they subcontracted out to used AI to generate the background image. So Hasbro comes out and says, no, it's not AI. No, it's not AI. We're not using AI. But the company who they subcontracted to goes, yeah, we used AI. And then we photoshopped things in to make it better. So Hasbro had to come out and make a statement that says, actually, we apologize. We didn't use AI. A company we contracted with did. And we didn't know.
Yep.
Well, now we've got this whole conundrum, right, about what is and isn't acceptable. So we should go back to the story that caused this topic to be on our radar, which is there was an event at a convention where someone had a sign on their booth that said some of this art was made using AI. Do you remember that story better than I do? Because that's the last part I remember.
Well, the funny thing is that, so I am that story. I went to Washington SummerCon last year, and I heard on the show floor that one of the booths, there's art booths at pretty much every Comic-Con if you don't go to them, that will sell like prints. I heard a rumor that one of them was using AI art. And sure enough, I found that booth because it was pretty easy to find once I started looking for it. And they were just selling generative AI art prints. Unfortunately, when I went to that booth, and I don't know if this was a coincidence or not, maybe they hightailed it. They had left and had a sign up saying that, hey, contact us on such and such platform. We're away from our booth right now. I don't know. When I went back, the sign was still up. I'm not sure if they ever came back, but I snapped a photo of that one, and I think you're actually referring to a different story, but that was before that happened, and it's interesting because the show organizers had a no AI policy, no AI art policy, but it's kind of that same scenario where they didn't know that booth was selling AI art because they didn't disclose it when they were selling it, which is that again becomes the problem. I think whether it's right or not, people are going to be more okay if you're upfront and honest about what you're doing. For sure. You might get it. I think it speaks volumes that people don't disclose it because they know the backlash they're going to get, though. And yet if you did, at least, you could say, well, they're honest about it. And the crazy thing is some people will still come and buy that stuff.
Right.
That's the nuts part of it to me.
So, right. And that's the end of the statement for me, right? In terms of, are we too hard on AI artists? I think we're not right now. Because right now, there is no real, for the most part, disclosure.
Yeah.
Right? Like when you buy a piece of original art from somebody and it's Blue Line, they tend to tell you that it's Blue Line and not Original Pencils, right? When you go to buy something from when you go to buy a picture from an artist, they'll tell you it's a print and not the original.
Yeah.
With AI currently, the problem is that they don't have to and often don't disclose that technique. I have no problem with if somebody made a really cool piece of fan art and used some AI to help them get where they're going and they're just selling posters for $10. I have no problem if you buy a poster to hang on your wall. I really don't. To each their own. But that guy needs to be saying, look, I made this with AI. And then it gives the buyer the ability to make the choice. Am I going to patronize this seller knowing how they made their things? It's in the same mindset of this is a diamond that was grown in a lab versus this is a naturally harvested diamond versus this is a blood diamond. Well, for each one of those things, I'm willing to spend a different amount of money. Right? And I'm not willing to buy a blood diamond, but I'm also not going to pay as much for a lab grown diamond as I am for a diamond that was naturally harvested. Yeah. Right? So same thing with art. If you make something really cool and you're giving it away for free and I want to make it my desktop background, fine. As long as you tell me that you made it with AI. Right? If you're telling me, oh, well, I drew X, Y, and Z and X and, A, B, and C are AI. And okay, great. I can make a financial decision about whether I want to support you. That's the difference. I think that's the, are we too hard on AI art? Yes, but we should be.
Yeah.
Until the standardization is there. Until the standardization is there, I don't think we have a clear answer, right? And I think part of that is going to come down to this lawsuit, right? Midjourney is being sued by artists whose art was scraped to feed that. OpenAI and Microsoft AI are being sued by the New York Times, who they didn't license their materials in order to train the AI, so they're being sued for billions of dollars.
Yeah.
You have to be able to, again, and this is where the law is going to come down, right? And somebody mentioned it. Should they have to give credit for the artists whose art they've borrowed? Right? When you generate something with a generative AI, if you give credit to all the artists that have been ripped off, that's different than just saying, oh, I made this.
Yeah, it's definitely different. I mean, whether you could argue it's acceptable, it's at least again, it's that transparency piece of you're saying, for example, Synchrotron here is talking about the graffiti world and biting someone and taking their style, and you wouldn't do that. But there's a really easy comic book comparison you can make there with swiping. And swiping's been around for a long time. It's much different to swipe somebody's artwork and say after Todd McFarlane when you sign the drawing versus not doing that, right? And right. Unfortunately, that almost is its own thing. Maybe not for a full topic on a video or something like that, but that's become a thing too, where that's become less and less common. But you did used to see that all the time when an artist was using somebody else's art knowingly. They would often credit that artist. And I think that was an appropriate way to attribute to that artist and their original work. And we see that less and less. And I think that's something that you can apply to this as well pretty easily.
Right. So we had this topic and we wanted to come up with where do we draw the line. And I think right now the line has to be drawn at disclosure.
Yeah.
Right. The line is AI art good or bad is not a question we can answer. The only thing we can answer at the moment is you have to disclose that that's what you're using. And because then it lets everyone make their own moral decision.
And
you don't have the wool
decision.
pulled over your you have the wool pulled over your eyes.
Yep.
And then once these lawsuits are settled, once we see where the world comes down on this sort of thing, there will be a more definitive legal answer as to what's cool and what's not. And that will shift the line. Right? Okay, I'm a fan of legal AI. I'm not a fan of illegal AI. Right? I'm a fan of you giving credit to the artists whose art was used in the scraping that created this. But I'm sorry, I'm blowing up right now. I've got so many people messaging me right now. It's good that my ADHD is getting strong.
I hear you, man.
The disclosure. So until the lawsuits are settled and we know what's legal and what's not legal, what you need to do to be a responsible user of AI versus an irresponsible user of AI. Right? Those differences matter. Will move the line again.
Yeah, 100%. So
I'm gonna give my takeaway from this, and I think it's gonna be different than where someone on my moral positioning on this would normally come down. You have to be hard on people using AI, but you cannot be definitive. You have to hold people who are using AI's feet to the fire and make sure they're disclosing their use of AI and make sure they're using it properly and make sure they're explaining, what they're doing. Rob Liefeld's another one who does a lot of that. And you know what? As much crap as I give Rob Liefeld, I give him a lot of credit for I stole it from myself.
Yeah.
You can't really steal it if it's yourself.
My favorite example of that, just real fast, because speaking of ADHD, we're both off topic for a slight second here, is and maybe this is the one you're talking about, I can't remember, but a lot of people talk about how much ASM 300 has been homaged, and it has. But ASM 300 is an homage to McFarlane's own cover on Hulk 3. Oh boy,
right.
Not 343, whatever one it is. Great cover swipe by the man himself. So yeah, it's fun, John. Thanks for bringing that up.
One of my favorite ones is Rob Liefeld on Bloodstrike #1. Just redrew New Mutants 98 and changed the colors. Like, all right, bro.
Yeah, man. I mean, you do you.
Right. I mean, literally.
Literally.
But,
yeah.
Right. We should be hard on people who are using AI right now because they are the outlaws in the Wild West. Right. They're operating in an area that isn't defined, that isn't clear, that isn't regulated. And as it becomes regulated, either they fall in line or they become these outlaws. And if you're not hard on them, they have no reason to fall in line. That said, we cannot be definitive. We can't write anybody off. We can't cancel anybody. We can't throw anybody out of the business. We can't do any of that stuff until all of this is settled. Because again, the difference between somebody creating an AI image and passing it off as their own and the difference between this image co-founder creating their own machine learning program and their own software to help them make their own art based off their own stuff is such a fine line that we as non-artists, even if we were artists, can't really differentiate. So we need to chill out on the AI artists, not on the AI art.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, some of my final thoughts on this, it's actually great that you mentioned that, because that's one of the places I want to end up. Is there is almost like this witch hunt going on for AI art right now, and I understand it. I understand why we're at the point we're at when it comes to AI art, and a lot of that is happening from other artists. But I really just want to caution against that. So I've seen examples, and I will not name names in this particular part of the conversation because I don't want to send people to certain places to be part of any mobs. But I've seen artists who I am confident in saying that they are not quote unquote AI artists. Doesn't mean it's impossible for them to use those tools. I'm just saying that I don't believe the vast majority of their work is created with AI art. They've posted their own images of like, hey, look, here's this art I made, and it comes up through AI search tools. A lot of people use Hive AI image detection, for example, and it comes up as AI generated. Here's a video of me drawing that piece at a convention or whatever. That kind of thing has happened. And so you have to be careful when you go and make those claims, especially as an artist, because this let's just run it through an AI image detection. I've done a lot of that myself recently. I've been curious about some pieces of art, and I've run it through detectors and seen how it comes up. And sometimes you're going to get false positives, and sometimes you're going to get false negatives when it comes to those pieces of software, because some of those artists are actually keen and aware of those tools and are actually making it harder for their stuff to be detected. There is a process that can happen where you can use a program like Daz 3D, create an AI generated pose, and you could completely trace over that digitally in your own style over the top of it. And you can even photo bash and create your own image, so to speak, on top of that. And then when you're all said and done, you're just taking the top layer and then you're coloring it yourself and working it out yourself. Those things aren't going to be detected in AI image generation software, but you're going to have saved yourself a lot of work, and you're going to be taking images from other places. And so you do have to be careful to assume that something isn't AI generated, and when you assume something is AI generated. And the last thing I wanted to say, besides, tread lightly out there when you're talking about AI art, I think it's okay to talk about the practices. It's okay to talk about the philosophy behind it. But pointing fingers and all these types of things, I think we need to be careful doing it. The last thing I wanted to mention, I did this before the show. I ran through ChatGPT the 5 biggest concerns about people using AI art in comic books that would be good for a YouTube video. And I just want to the words of ChatGPT itself from ChatGPT. Credit here to ChatGPT.
This is how you get Terminators.
You got to be careful of the loss of artistic originality. You have to worry about the ethical dilemmas in creation, the quality and consistency challenges, the impact on employment in the industry, and the audience reception and connection. And it's funny. I mean, it's a very good talking point list for this type of topic, because there's things that we covered. I think literally all of those things when we talked about this. So it's a fascinating discussion. I'm guaranteed it'll come up again in some form or some aspect of a conversation we're going to have again in the future. Speaking of the future, a lot of folks are going to wonder what we're going to talk about next week on the Devil's Advocates.
Yeah, I just logged in because I didn't remember.
Okay. Are you refreshed now?
Yeah, but I don't remember what that means. So
okay. So we're actually going to do something a little more fun, a little more potentially a little bit more bloodthirsty, believe it or not. We're going to talk about our favorite Marvel and DC heroes and which ones are better. We're going to put them up against each other, and later on we're going to do the villains. But for the first chunk of that, we're going to do the heroes. And so that should be a pretty fun video. If you have any heroes that you want thrown out there in the mix, let us know in the comments and of this video. And also, by the way, you can always suggest a topic for us to talk about. We have a form for that on the EXP website that I'm sure Jay is going to be magically pasting in a chat here any second. And we'd love to hear about the topics that you guys want us to talk about. Things like, AI art, things like CGC grading scandals, the things that we've been talking about recently. A lot of that comes from suggestions we've had from our audience, and we would really love to hear what you guys have to say. So I appreciate all those suggestions. Thank you, everybody.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm already thinking about next week and how I'm not prepared.
Well, luckily we've got a whole week to prepare, so we're going to be coming at you strong. Hopefully, I won't be in an ICU by then. The Dayquil has helped me go through this, but it's starting to wear off. So I'm going to go back into my hibernation chamber and come back stronger than ever for next week for that debate.
Yes, there is an EXP Discord. Sicko, I am not 1,000% sure how to share that with you at this moment.
I will paste an invite into chat. Just give me 2 seconds, and I will paste that into chat so we have it for Sickotron, and then for anybody else watching later, we can paste it into the description, hopefully. And I have the link copied, and it is getting pasted now.
I built it, I set it up, and then I let other people run it. I don't know.
Hi, I'm other people. How's it going?
Basically,
I know. I'm
Jay and Bronze basically make sure it doesn't get taken off.
But it's you know what, we'd love to see over there. We'd love to see more conversation over there. We are going to be working on some ways to build out some further conversations to take place over there. And then on top of that, do we want to talk about another event coming up on the EXP, Kyle? No? Okay, we're not going to talk about another. There's more events coming up on the EXP, I swear. So
yeah, only because there's some question that has been called into that event in the last hour.
I didn't want to repeat the mistakes of last week, so I will not do that. So yeah, we thank you guys for being here tonight. Thanks for being part of the conversation. We promise we have not been AI generated characters having this conversation.
If you haven't hit subscribe, hit subscribe. We have new content on the EXP that will be coming out, but we're waiting until we reach a certain benchmark. So until we get to that certain number, no new content, but then new content once we get to that certain number. So if you haven't hit subscribe, make sure you hit subscribe.
It's like a Kickstarter unlock.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily holding you hostage for that other content, but I'm holding you hostage for that other content.
Now, tell your friends. We'd love to see them over here. I'd love to see them in chat too. So make sure you share this out wherever you talk about comic books, because we'd love to see all people and all voices in here, because it helps us have a more rounded conversation, which we enjoy. We want to see things from everybody's perspective.
Absolutely. And Stargazer, yeah, check it out. Basically, the New York Times lawsuit is about some of these companies have paid other media sources to be able to scrape. Which is a form of licensing. And they didn't license with the New York Times, but they used the New York Times. So how much do they owe the New York Times? And I'll give you a hint. It starts with a B and ends with illions.
6 Brazilians.
6 Brazilians. What? No. 6 bazillions. Yes. All right. We got to go. Bronze is getting punchy. I've got 17 text messages to answer. So we will see everybody next week, where we talk about who's better, Batman or not Batman.
Moon Knight versus Batman. Fight.
I have to think about that one.
Yeah.
And we will talk about that next week in a much lighter, much easier conversation, but somehow still heated. So we will see everyone next week here on the Devil's Advocates. Thank you, guys. Join the party. Head over to our link tree to find all the links for everywhere the experience is all the time.